Out of the corner of my eye, I saw something. I didn't know what it was. It looked huge. There was no immediate, yeah, I know what that is. There was nothing that made sense in that moment. It was, that is something big, and that's something that shouldn't be in this lake.
North Carolina is the most ecologically unique state in the Southeast, making it home to 1,300 diverse species of mammals, birds, reptiles, fish, amphibians, and mollusks. But not all of the state's creatures can be found in a zoo or wild animal park. Some are so elusive that only a select few have laid eyes on them. Welcome to First in Fright, where we explore eerie legends, supernatural tales, and everything that goes bump in the North Carolina night. I'm your host, Cooper Thornton. This is Episode 3, Carolina Cryptids. A cryptid is a creature whose existence has never been proven. They exist outside of science and biology and have captured our imaginations and fueled countless legends. This episode takes us through central Piedmont all the way to the Appalachian Mountains in the west. We'll hear from people who have come face to face with the unknown and lived to tell the tale. Our local storyteller starts with an account about the most famous cryptid of all, Bigfoot, or known in North Carolina as Knobby.
Knobby first gained widespread attention in the late 1970s when numerous sightings occurred near the small northwestern town of Kaiser in an isolated and rugged pocket of the mountains known as Carpenter's Knob. It is from this region that Knobby got his name. Witnesses reported seeing a towering ape-like creature standing nearly 10 feet tall, weighing at least 200 pounds and covered in dark fur. Its presence was often accompanied by an eerie silence in the woods, as if even the wildlife was wary of this mysterious being. But when Knobby opened its mouth, the sound it made was a scream, almost like a woman in pain. Those closest to the creature said that it smelled like a mix of wet dog and decay. Over a span of several days, there were reports of something breaking into local barns and killing livestock, and large footprints, neither human nor animal, were found throughout the area. The reports were taken so seriously that researchers and monster hunters immediately began a search of the area. They found nothing. Throughout the years, sightings of Knobby have continued sporadically, keeping the legend alive. In 2010, Kaiser resident Tim Peeler made national news when the self-proclaimed mountain man said he encountered the beast after it wandered onto his isolated mountain property. He was inside his cabin when he heard screeching and grunting sounds coming from outside. When he opened the door to see what was making the noise, he encountered the massive ape creature advancing on his 2 dogs. Seizing a nearby walking stick, he lunged at Knobby repeatedly. "You get away from here! Get! He bellowed. Eventually, the creature disappeared back down the side of the mountain. Recently, after several more residents claimed to have seen Knobby in the woods, the local police department began begging people not to shoot their local Sasquatch, worried that it might be a sweaty human in a gorilla suit playing a prank. But people like Tim know better. They know what they encountered.
North Carolina's most terrifying creatures don't only live on land. Lake Norman, a man-made lake north of Charlotte, was created to provide the Piedmont region with hydroelectric power. It's so big, some locals refer to it as an inland sea, and it's a popular spot for swimming, boating, fishing, and water skiing. However, most of the people who spend time at the lake have no idea that what could be hiding beneath the surface is a creature nicknamed Normie, the state's very own version of the Loch Ness Monster.
My name is Alex. I'm a photographer from Western North Carolina.
And my name is Gloria. I am a swim instructor from Charlotte, North Carolina. Alex went to school at Mars Hill, so we used to hang out all the time throughout our college years.
I grew up on Lake Norman pretty much my entire life since I was 5 years old. Spent my summers swimming and fishing, and I know that there's supposedly like rumors of nuclear waste. So there's, it's a mysterious lake, human-made or not. It's got something going on.
Honestly, lakes kind of scare me. I don't like murky water. I am a swim instructor. I like clear water that I can see. Murky water kind of freaks me out. I don't know what's down there.
Well, yeah, people knew about Normie, and you had your believers, and then you had people like me who thought it was utter nonsense. And obviously, I spent so much time down by the lake, and I never saw it, so I thought it was just nonsensical cryptid story. So around sophomore year of college, I took Gloria to Lake Norman to help me with some astrophotography. I wanted to practice taking pictures of the stars. And to do it, you need to be in a place with very, very little light. So we decided that the lake would provide us that. We got up on the dock, I set up my tripod and a long exposure on my camera, because that's how you collect light to take pictures of stars. And
out of the corner of my eye, I saw something. I didn't know what it was. It looked huge. And then we heard this crash in the water, like big. And then we could see its ripples coming out after that. There was no immediate, yeah, I know what that is. There was nothing that made sense in that moment. It was, that is something big, and that's something that shouldn't be in this lake.
We're absolutely freaking out because my whole life I was like, oh, cryptids are fake, Bigfoot's fake. I'm never going to be in one of those scenarios because those scenarios are baloney, And here we are. It's happening right before our very eyes.
We don't know what it is. The light wasn't good enough to see the object, but it was enough to see the light reflecting off of the ripples and see it moving out towards the middle of the lake. And at that point, Alex tried to get his camera to get a picture of it.
Yeah, our only hope was to use my camera. We're here to get star pictures. That is just obsolete at this point. Now the mission is to get a picture of whatever creature we witnessed, right? We didn't have a flash to work with because you don't use a flash for star photography. So I pointed out in the middle of the lake, just hoping I get anything.
I'm shaking, we're leaning over the edge of the thing. I was just trying to hold his hands as steady as possible.
We stayed out on the dock for a while, waiting for something to come back. Nothing came back, so we rushed back inside to see what we had captured.
We ran back inside. I was scared. We ran back inside. I'm shaking. We're
I think Gloria's right. Yeah, I don't think there was any time for
this
me.
This was a calm situation.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
We had no idea what was going to show up in that picture. Is there anything that we can see that explains the noise? And in the middle of the picture, there's this almost hand reaching up out of the water.
It was the worst photo I've ever taken in my career, but it's all we got. You got to remember, for star photography, I had a wide lens. So this is not a zoom lens. I didn't have a flash. This is the worst conditions to take a picture of a cryptid you could possibly imagine. And I think it's pretty undeniable that there's something that's breaking in the water.
And it's exactly where we were pointing the camera, too. That's where we pointed the picture at where the thing was. And there's a thing there in the picture. Isn't that how all cryptid pictures are? They're if it's a cryptid picture, it's got to be blurry, it's got to be messy, because nobody's got a clear picture of a cryptid. That's why they're cryptids.
Right. In that moment, I felt the frustration of every cryptid storyteller has ever felt, and the ones that I've been making fun of my whole life. I finally knew what they felt like. If you're a Bigfoot denier and you find Bigfoot, you have to dedicate your life to showing people that Bigfoot's real, right? So at this point, I'm an aspiring music major at a college, and I didn't want to throw away my life to pursue Normie, so I was hesitant to put it on the Normie website and devote my life to monster hunting. But Gloria convinced me to do so, and I kind of did it out of spite of my parents because they didn't believe me, and they thought I was stupid.
They thought it could have been a catfish.
Ridiculous.
I hated that one.
Awful. So we put it on the website, and it's haunted me ever since. I have never been able to escape the story, but the honest truth is I do not know what we encountered that night. I just don't know what it was. And maybe I saw Normie, right?
And maybe
I had
we saw
the
Normie.
encounter. I used to be a skeptic, and I still am, but I guess life is always a little more fun when you tune in to the mysteries.
Now we make our way from the deep waters below to the towering heights of the Great Smoky Mountains of Appalachia, where scary things can be found, like the demon dog of Valle Crucis.
Valle Crucis is a quiet hill town whose name comes from the Latin Vale of the Cross because several local streams converge near the Holy Cross Episcopal Church to form the shape of a cross. As legend has it, sometime in the 1980s, two friends were driving past the church at night under the light of a full moon when a shadowy dog-like shape leapt from the church graveyard directly into their path, causing the driver to swerve wildly to avoid hitting it. Fighting to regain control of his vehicle, the driver crushed his brakes and looked over his shoulder, praying he hadn't hit the unfortunate animal. But what he saw wasn't a dog, exactly. This was a dog conjured out of a nightmare, a creature as tall as a man, covered with bristling black fur and bearing massive yellow fangs and eyes that burned with red fire. "Do you see that?" the man in the passenger seat exclaimed. "No," the driver shot back, "and neither do you." As they sped off, racing back down the mountain, the animal followed, and to the men's horrified astonishment, the demon dog was gaining. No matter how fast or how dangerously they drove, the hellhound was never more than a few feet behind them, its saliva-flecked fangs nipping at the car's rear bumper. Just as it was about to catch them, the car raced across a wooden bridge that spanned the cross-shaped streams. Immediately, the beast stopped its pursuit. The shape of the cross, the men later said, was the only thing that stopped it, the only thing that saved their lives.
If a demon dog sounds terrifying, imagine a creature so vicious it mutilates dogs as well as pigs and goats. Believe it or not, it's a creature that looks like a kitty cat. In 1954, the tiny farming town of Bladenboro in south-central North Carolina was rocked by a series of gruesome animal mutilations. Bladenboro was locked down. Women and children hid indoors, and men didn't leave the house without a gun. Witnesses reported seeing blink-and-you-miss-it glimpses of a massive cat-like creature roaming the woods just outside of town. After the mysterious monster went after a young mother outside her home, the state papers ran with the story. Soon, more than 1,000 hunters from around the country descended on Bladenboro to help track the beast down and destroy it. It was never found. But just a couple hundred miles from Bladenboro in the Appalachian Mountains, sightings of a similar creature are popping up.
My name is Rob Lenfesty, and I own a raw organic superfood chocolate company called Mandala Chocolate. And currently, I own and run a 67-acre retreat center and community called Mandala Springs. So to paint yourself a picture of where I am at, I've got Pisgah National Forest on 3 sides, beautiful boulder fields, ancient forest, the most biologically diverse place in the entire subtropical world. There are 40 springs on this property alone, part of the 3rd oldest watershed on Earth. Beautiful crystalline clear water with waterfalls and beautiful rock features. It is a real exquisite ecological gem. It's paradise. So I have this beautiful retreat center here where people can come and do different kinds of workshops and retreats, but sometimes we have people show up to really just do like a solo experience out in the woods. And I had a gentleman from Lebanon come to do a 4-day solo out in the woods. And so he went up and he found his spot. And in the Native American tradition, you sort of create a circle. You create some sort of boundary around yourself, and that's your safe place. And he had a little fire, in the middle of his circle. And he just decides to howl right at the sunset. He's just howling off into the woods. And what he wasn't expecting was that he got a response, a deep guttural scream, very much akin to a mountain lion, but deeper. This scream didn't just happen once, but it started kind of spiraling around him, getting closer and closer. So whatever it was coming closer and closer to him. It's getting to be dusk. He has one little log left lit in his fire, and all of a sudden, about 30 feet off behind him, he hears this thing. Just screams right there. And he turns around and here's this creature. It's got a very long body, so it's kind of curled around itself. It's perched in such a way like it's preparing itself to pounce. It's got its mouth open, its tongue lolling, big sharp teeth, and blue eyes. According to him in that moment, he wasn't necessarily immediately afraid. It was more like that calm sort of survival state kicks in. And by whatever instinct, he takes one single step in his circle still, one single step towards it. In a flash, this thing turned and bound about 30 feet up onto a boulder, turned and screamed at him again, and then it bounded again the same distance further away, turned and screamed, and it repeated this action until it was gone. So for him, he's way up on the mountain, he's by himself, he's in his little protected circle. He's like, well, if I leave my circle and I try to hike down the mountain in the dark, I don't know how to get back. And, I'm putting myself in more danger. Or I can just try to stay here in this spot and go to sleep. And according to him, he actually had a good night's sleep. He ended up actually having the nerve to lay down and fall asleep in his circle. So when he came back down, he asked me, coming from Lebanon, he didn't really know much about the ecosystem here. So with sort of a naive earnestness, he was like, hey, so I had this encounter with this creature. What kind of creature is this? And I'm like, Mon, there's nothing that resembles that in these mountains. I thought, it was maybe the light getting dim. Maybe he had an encounter with a mountain lion, which would still be terrifying at that close of range and having it confronting him and being isolated and alone in the woods. But, I've been around enough that I didn't completely dismiss everything, but I definitely didn't give it much thought. I was like, okay, he had this really profound experience. It definitely seemed to be really impactful for him. And I sort of let it slip from my mind after that. About 2.5 months after Mon had his encounter, I decided to wander over to the property boundary with the National Forest. And there's a series of smaller flat areas there, and I was kind of walking through the woods and envisioning where future buildings and future infrastructure and roads and things like that could be. So I was just kind of moving slowly and just kind of in this reverie. I'm wearing a red terry cloth bathrobe and plaid pajama pants. So I'm definitely creating kind of a pretty ridiculous figure in the woods when all of a sudden I hear a noise behind me and I turn around and look up the hill. And keep in mind, this is the winter time. So the forest is wide open. So right at the top of the hill, there's a big rock face, and sitting on top of this rock face is this creature looking at me with its blue eyes and its tongue out, with its body curled in on itself, perched on the rock like it's ready to jump. What's funny is the very first thought that went through my head, the very first thing was, Mon was right. I'm going to be conservative with my estimations of length and size. It was about 12 feet long. A conservative estimate for its shoulders was about 4 feet wide. It was probably about 4 feet, maybe a little more off the ground. Its body was proportionate to like a lion, but significantly larger than any lion that I have ever seen. It had massively muscular, like almost ludicrously muscular legs and body and shoulders, big, broad, strong shoulders. Its thick white fur was matted to its body, has a long tail that has no thick fur on it except for a tuft at the very end. And the thing that is most irregular about this creature was that its head was actually very small relative to its shoulders and was sort of tucked under its shoulders and narrow and more shaped like a wolf's head would be. That struck me as very strange and sort of out of place. Once I saw the creature and once I made eye contact with it, it leapt off the boulder, probably covered about 40 feet in this first leap because it was leaping down the hill, and just crashed into all of the brush, into all the branches. And it continued to bound in these massive bounds with these giant muscular legs, crushing everything underneath it, not making any attempt at subtlety at all. Right down the side of the mountain in front of me and out of sight. You know, when this thing ran past me, it felt like the way that a big predator cat would respond to another predator creature myself. If it was scared of me, it could have turned around on the rock it was standing on and gone in the other direction, but instead it chose to jump off the rock and basically present itself to me in the most clear and obvious way that conveyed like the whole message, like, I'm not afraid of you. I'm here in my territory. It was a behavior that I would have expected from a large predator. What's fascinating is I didn't feel fear. I was just kind of in this shocked awe and fascination and just really eating up every detail of this creature, just like soaking up the fact that this was really happening in front of me in this moment. Something completely inexplicable, something that completely defied anything that I know about this ecosystem. This didn't feel like some sort of mystical creature that could dissolve into different dimensions. It felt like an animal as visceral and real as you and I. But sometime before I even got home, my brain was telling me that this was an animal that has not been properly classified. I thought about the fact that an adult mountain lion can have a very large range. And they're solitary animals. They can have like really hundreds of miles of territory that one animal is able to maintain. So a part of me thought, well, imagine an animal this size that moves as quickly as this one does. Its territory could be staggering. You know, it could be 1,000 miles for a single adult animal. And I realized it's completely conceivable that this, in fact, could be a very real animal that has continued to exist in these mountains and is just so rare and has such a vast territory that it's remained, at least on an official level, undiscovered. So then, one day, I am hiking in the national forest directly off the edge of my land. And I've got some neighbors that are part of a family that's lived here multi-generationally. And there's an old woman and an old man. And they're on this trail in the national forest just upstream from my property. And I'm sitting and chatting with them. And this was a little awkward moment for me because these are very down-to-earth people. So I'm like, this might sound a little awkward, but I had this experience. And I'm curious if you've ever seen a creature that looks like this. It's this big white, before I could even say anything else, the old woman, she kind of slapped her husband on the head and said, "I told you so." She got really excited and she finished describing it to me perfectly. What I didn't realize is for probably 25 years, this had been a debate in their household. Like, she had had this experience with this creature and he totally didn't believe her. So she was with some friends in the woods very close by in the same general area, and they were walking back to the car on this trail. When they reached just before you get to the road, this giant cat creature comes out of the woods right in front of them, and it leaps onto the top of her car, crushes the roof of her car, and then leaps across the road and out of sight. Boom, boom, just like that. And she'd been swearing up and down to him for a long time. And he didn't believe her. So this moment was this real exoneration for her of this old story. The very next person that I asked was a friend of mine who's a full-blooded Cherokee elder. And he's like, "Oh yeah, I haven't seen it myself, but my brother did." So come to find out, there's quite a bit of firsthand experience of witnessing these creatures. It completely flipped the whole script in my mind. So I typed in a Google search, cat, cryptid, North America, and it said Cherokee Wampus Cat. So this is an animal associated with this region right here. When someone spends a lot of time in these woods, off trail, in the wilderness, you come to realize that one of the things that makes this region so magical is, despite how robust our satellite imagery gets and how much of this world we can kind of look at from the top down and think that we know what's going on there, as soon as you're in the woods, you're in the little gorges and watersheds and under the massive boulders that don't even look like they exist from above because all you see is the forest. Entire worlds in these mountains that you will never know are there until you literally physically go. What you really start to realize is that there is a very, very large world out there, and the part of it that people are frequenting is very small. And so it really makes sense to me that if something was very repulsed by the human element, that it could easily and happily live its entire life cycle out without, but very rarely, coming into any sort of relationship with us. I do want to see it again. I really do. And really, at the end of the day, I'm just really grateful that I got to have that experience and to really get that confirmation that this world is a much wilder and unknown place than we have been led to believe.
Whether you're a believer or a skeptic, today's stories challenge us to keep an open mind and to consider that there may be more to our world than meets the eye.
All of a sudden, straight down the tracks comes this very large burst of wind, like a train rushed by.
On our next episode, from ghost trains to a phantom hitchhiker, North Carolina has some restless spirits who are always on the move.
I'd regularly take drives out to this bridge and just sit there, trying to feel her spirit.
To learn more about the paranormal places and scary stories of North Carolina, visit ncfirstandfright.com. Discover trails and destinations that will haunt you in the best way, and share your own NC scare by tagging hashtag #NCFirstInFright. First in Fright is a production of Visit North Carolina, Luke Wire, and AYR Media. Hosted by me, Cooper Thornton. Executive producers Katie Bailey and Dana Grimstead for Visit North Carolina. Executive producers Nancy Landisberg, Michael Ashley, and Ryan Coleman for Luke Wire. Executive producer Eliza Rosen for AYR Media. Produced and written by Brandon Phibbs. Edited and mixed by Cameron Taggy. Casting producer Danielle Hillenbrand. AYR Media Coordinator Andy Levine. Voices by North Carolina storyteller Michael Reno Harrell. Special thanks to Alex Namhui, Gloria Clark, and Rob Linfesti for sharing their stories.